So, welcome. What's up? It's Deborah Watts, and I'm so honored to be here with Elizabeth Estes. She's an attorney here in Arizona, and I'm really honored to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for making the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Oh, thanks for asking me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited, if you don't mind, just sharing just really quickly a little bit about yourself and maybe like what brought you into this field, because I know it's probably not the easiest job. So please share.
Sure. Let's see. I not originally from Arizona, but I've been here almost 30 years. Finished up my undergrad, went to law school here at ASU.
That's awesome. Wow, I can tell you have a big heart. And just even just sharing all that you've shared with us, with me before our interview, I knew you had a heart for caring and helping people. So thank you for the work you do.
Sure, thank you.
So this is a really hot topic, and I hear so many, myths about divorce and how it's going to go and how people think it's going to help them. So I was hoping that you could help us shed some light on some of these topics. So I have our list of questions, and then since we weren't able to do it live, hopefully people will have other questions that they can ask. And if you don't mind, maybe like if there's a question I can field to you, I'll just forward it to you for you to answer. Okay, cool. Thank you. So the first question we have up is, tell us, what exactly is a toxic divorce?
It's usually a pattern of behavior that was started before the divorce ever started. Usually one of the reasons why there's a divorce, and then it continues on through the divorce. Every once in a while, it's actually something that starts during the divorce. But the way I look at it, it's that out to get the other person. You argue over plates, you argue over TVs and things like that instead of the big issues, because you're continuing the divorce. If you have attorneys, you're continuing to drive attorneys' fees up, and it's something that you're really trying to get the other person, usually because it's unresolved issues having to do with the end of the marriage.
So why would we want to avoid this, other than, as you just mentioned, what are some of the other cons to allowing a divorce to get toxic?
Just like any bad relationship, you want to try and correct it or end it. And a divorce is the same way. It is probably one of the most difficult experiences anybody will go through. It is stressful. When you are in a toxic divorce, it's tenfold what it would be normally. It's just worse. It perpetuates the cycle, whatever that cycle is, that got you there in the first place, and doesn't allow you to move on with your life. So the biggest issue is, of course, getting done with the divorce and then moving on with your life. When you're in a toxic divorce, it can last a long time, which is not good for anybody.
Yeah, totally imagine. So tell us a little bit about what happens in the courtroom. And I know every state and every judge is going to be different, but just some of the general ideas you mentioned about how a judge sees you and your spouse and that kind of thing.
First of all, for the most part, and in most states, we are a non-fault state. So the judge really doesn't care. The judge has the law to apply, which is not rocket science. Here in Arizona, we have community property law. We are one of the few states that does that. But it's an equitable division of the property, and then dealing with children, if you have those, a parenting plan, who's going to be the decision maker, and those types of things. But the judge, other than if you're abusive, and that only counts really towards kids, doesn't care what you do, doesn't care about your history, does not care about your past. And there is no winning a divorce. You do not go in and think, I'm going to get the other person, I'm going to win. There's no winning a divorce. The winning is getting through it as quickly and as painlessly as possible. So I want people to understand, and I see this a lot in my practice, people want to tell me the history of why they're where they're at. There are people like you who can help them with that. But that's not me, and you don't want to pay me for it either. So let me do my job, and we get you through the divorce. And that's probably the biggest thing, is don't think the judge cares and don't think you're going to win.
Wow. So the judge doesn't do the, oh, he's right and she's wrong, or she's right and he's wrong. That's not how it goes? No.
In fact, really, like I tell people all the time, it really comes down to a division of money and assets and debt, who gets what, and there are principles of law that are applied to those things, but it's not who's right or who's wrong. Occasionally it might be that position is right or that position is wrong, if you're arguing for a division of a marital business, something like that, whose expert might be right. But those are pretty technical type issues. But it's not, he treated me badly, therefore I should own the business. That's not going to happen.
Okay, I got it. So are there options other than like alternatives to traditional litigated divorce?
Absolutely, and usually healthier for people too.
Mm.
Litigation is necessary in some cases, and obviously I do it, so I'm not going to say it shouldn't be done, but I see a lot happier people, and again, this comes from my background of really wanting to help when they do mediation, and now we have, oh gosh, it just escaped me, collaborative divorces. And a collaborative divorce, you are using usually experts, like when you have a business, somebody to help you to divide those things. There's usually a counselor on board too. There are all sorts of, there are attorneys on board, but they sign an agreement to work in a collaborative fashion in order to finish the divorce or get the divorce done. So there's no real adversarial like there is in traditional litigation. And then of course there's mediation, which is the two of you, or the two parties, going in front of a mediator, sometimes with attorneys, sometimes it can be done without attorneys, but trying to hash out their problems and allowing the mediator to guide them to a solution. Mediators generally either a former judge or an attorney who's been practicing in family law for years. One of the things that's nice about being an attorney in this area, if you can say that, is that with experience comes a lot of knowledge. It's not difficult for me to look at any case and what people are telling me and to tell them what's going to happen. And that's kind of what happens in mediation. When I'm hired to do a mediation, I can basically tell both parties, if this is what you're telling me, this is what a judge is going to decide. Vast majority. Every once in a while it goes a little wonky, but for the most part, we know how cases are going to go. And so if you mediate a case, obviously it's a lot less expensive, it's over a lot quicker, less painful, and you're going to get the same result pretty much all the time.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about the cost. Let's just talk numbers for just a second. And I know everyone's situation is different, so we're not saying this is like, for everybody, but just general ballpark ranges of like mediation or collaborative divorce versus like a peaceful traditional litigated versus like a toxic traditional litigated. Like what are the differences in price, cost?
You generally, if you're hiring an attorney, and you are in one way, shape, or form, if you use any one of those. Either it's the mediator and you're going to pay for the mediator's time.
Mm-hmm.
If you have your own attorneys, you're going to pay for the attorney's time. If you're in a collaborative divorce, you're paying for everybody's time. It's half, it's split. But the counselor that's involved, the attorneys that are involved, all of that, you're paying for half of that time. So although that may seem like a lot of people, generally it's over a lot quicker. What happens in a toxic divorce is it continues because you're arguing about everything. Divorces can continue for a long time when you argue about everything, and that's a toxic divorce. So I would say attorney's fees, maybe on the low side, you're looking at $300 an hour. On the high side, probably $600 or $700 an hour for the really high-end downtown big divorce guys and gals. So you could be easily looking at, in a toxic divorce, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000. You do not ever spend that in mediation or collaborative divorce. When you work together, even if it is through professionals, so that you're not working side by side with the person that you're divorcing, but you're working with professionals that are allowing you to, or helping you guide, find a solution, you're going to spend a lot less than you would in toxic divorce. And everybody's hourly. Occasionally you might find somebody out there. I think there are some document prep services, but again, that requires agreement with your soon-to-be ex-spouse, which doesn't always work with the two of you trying to do it. So with these other methods, you're a lot better off.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really nice to hear the other side of it, because I usually hear people when they're on the brink of, or, considering divorce, and maybe they're separated and they're trying to sort through what they want to do. And I'm like, you really want to get on a good page with that person, not from the standpoint of you have to be married to that person, but from the standpoint of you just want to be friends with that person, because you're still going to have to deal with this person. And divorce is probably the ugliest part of it. And then but it continues with the kids and all that other stuff.
Absolutely, and I see that all the time. In fact, you brought up a really good point. every once in a while, doesn't happen often, but every once in a while I see a couple coming in and they're, what is that, conscious uncoupling that we've heard through the celebrities, and that's exactly what they're doing. They've made a decision to divorce, but they don't have a bunch of animosity toward each other. They'll come to me either in a mediation capacity, or I'll get one party coming to me. They've got an agreement in place. They just want an attorney to draw it all up. Let me tell you, you can get the divorce done very inexpensively if you can manage to have a decent relationship with your soon-to-be ex-spouse.
Yeah, yeah. I would imagine maybe even under 10 grand or something if you were able to do it. Yeah, okay.
I'd say under 5. If you're coming in and you know what you want to do, and an attorney's just drawing it up, you could easily do it under 5.
Yeah, that's great information. Hopefully, this will be helpful to people. And then I guess I kind of touched on it a little bit, but tell us a little bit more about this divorce being the end or not the end of the relationship.
Well, the nice thing is, if you don't have children, you can make it the end. You won't have to deal with each other a whole lot. You can, and I'm going to come back to that. Obviously, if you have children, that's a whole different story. It's at least going to continue until they're out of child support phase, which is 18 or graduated from high school. Most kids are 18 when they graduate, so there's a few months somewhere in between there before child support ends. As we all know, though, child support doesn't really end when our children are 18.
No.
Although the court can't force you to pay for anything or share expenses anymore, the kids are still around. Therefore, so is your ex-spouse in all likelihood. Again, for the kids' sake, if you can have at least a civil relationship, you may not want to be married, obviously, but there are so many better, more helpful ways to deal with it, better for the kids. Because never mistake the fact that if you've got kids, the divorce is impacting them.
Of course.
And it's your job as a parent to try and minimize that impact as much as you can.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask about that because sometimes one person is like totally trying to be reasonable and peaceful and just kind of get it done, and the other person is like. So what can people do in that situation? Like, if they're the one who's trying to just be peaceful and get it done, and the other person is just constantly got some sort of toxic behavior that's coming in, what do you recommend during the divorce?
I recommend attorneys. And this is going to sound funny, and it's not at all self-promoting, but the theory is that get it so that you're not dealing with the other person directly anymore. Obviously, there's a toxic relationship going on that may or may not be able to be helped by some other professional. And don't get me wrong, professional help is definitely a good option when you're in the divorce process as well. But using a third party, somebody who isn't passionate about what you've been through, but knows the law, knows how to get through a case. Really good attorneys help their clients get through that. And like I said, I'm not trying to be self-promoting. It's really that third party, that neutral party in between, to still represent your interests, to still help you, but to keep you from having that direct face-to-face toxic relationship that's continuing. I know that I generally try to avoid getting involved in cases where I see that other person just wants to, or a potential client just wants to get the other person.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll talk to them and be able to talk them down off of that. And I know that other attorneys are the same way, but every once in a while we get one that's exactly what happens. If they listen to me, I can usually control that behavior or help them control that behavior. Sometimes though, it means I've got to let them go as a client.
Yeah. No, that's actually really, really important. And then last question we have here is, how can one co-parent with a toxic ex-spouse? This is a really hot topic. I know there's a lot on this topic, but I'm just curious as an attorney, what your perspective is on that.
Again, I'm all about getting that third party, that help. If you can work on your relationship with that person, all the better. If there's your services, something like that can help you actually improve that relationship, all the better. But if that's not working for you, or in conjunction with, if you can get that third party that kind of helps you deal with each other instead of so you're not directly dealing with each other during that difficult toxic time, that's very helpful. We have what we call parenting coordinators, usually attorneys that now do this either sole or that's their sole practice or part-time in conjunction with a family law practice. And they basically will hear the issues that are going on between a couple and their children, and then help them to either make a decision. If a decision can't be made, then they're going to issue a report to the court. There's some other kind of, like mediation is still able to be used on a discrete basis or a per issue basis, which can be done. But basically it's making sure obviously if you can repair the relationship so that you can co-parent, all the better. And if not, get a neutral or a third party involved somebody that can be the go-between between both of you.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad to hear this from you. Anything else that you want to share that you didn't get to yet?
Oh, I remember I was talking about, so if you're getting divorced and you've got kids, obviously there's going to be an ongoing relationship. What some people don't understand is even without kids, you can sometimes have an ongoing relationship. Some people have businesses together. They may decide that they want to continue to try and work in a business together. Doesn't usually work, but every once in a while something like that happens. Also retirement plans, pension plans, things like that might not come into play until years later, but as a divorced spouse, particularly here in Arizona, you're entitled to a part of that if it was earned during the marriage. So you may have been divorced 20 years and now pension payments are going to start coming or retirement payments are going to start coming. That requires you to work with that ex-spouse who may have been your ex-spouse now for quite some time. So I encourage people to think about that. That there are some cases where you literally can walk away and never see that person again. But there's I'd say the majority of cases, you're going to have some kind of relationship with that person moving on. And therefore, if you can repair or come to a new relationship where the two of you can coexist at least peacefully, much better for everybody, including yourself.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Wow. Whew, you just dropped a lot of gold on us today. I'm really grateful that you're sharing this because my perspective, and I'm so happy to hear this from you because I haven't been divorced before, so I have not experienced this, but I know from the standpoint of what I work with people on is we all play a role in the relationship. And it's just learning how to change the way the role you're playing will automatically reduce all of that toxicity and all of that stuff. And so important to learn these skills when you're going through a divorce so that, you can both come out with the least amount of damage and be able to do the best you can to be parents for your kids. So.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very much. Really honored. I'm going to post this up here in the next, 20 minutes or so. And then maybe some people will have some questions and we'll hopefully be able to get some written responses from you. But just wanted to thank you again for taking the time out to speak with us today.
Sure.